You're at a party. Laughter rings through the room. Glasses clink. Conversations overlap in a warm hum of human connection. You stand there, drink in hand, nodding along. Yet something feels off. The jokes seem shallow. The discussions feel like performances. The more you listen, the more you realize no one here is really saying anything. And then it hits you, the crushing weight of isolation, not from absence, but from awareness. You see the scripts people follow, the unconscious roles they play, the unspoken rules that keep everything smooth and superficial. And the terrifying thought dawns on you. You can't unsee it. This is the curse of intelligence. Not the kind measured by tests or degrees, but the deeper, more unsettling kind. The ability to perceive what others ignore, to question what others accept, to feel the hollowness behind the noise. The smarter you become, the more the world feels like a stage where everyone is acting, except you. And the loneliest realization of all, most people don't even know they're acting. Here's the paradox. Intelligence is supposed to be a gift. It opens doors, solves problems, grants understanding. Yet, the more you understand, the harder it becomes to belong. Why is it that the deeper you think, the fewer people can follow? Why does seeing through illusions make companionship so rare? Why is the price of awareness so often alienation? History's greatest minds knew this loneliness well. Nietzsche wandered the Alps, writing about truths too heavy for society to bear. Kierkegaard grappled with the despair of being too awake in a sleeping world. Emily Dickinson, who saw the world with piercing clarity, chose a life of solitude. Even Einstein confessed, "It is strange to be known so universally and yet to be so lonely." But this isn't just about geniuses and philosophers. This is about you. That moment you bit your tongue because the truth would shatter the mood. That time you pretended to laugh at a joke you found painfully dull. That growing sense that the things people care about, status, trends, small talk, feel like distractions from something far more real. This is the great unspoken suffering of intelligence. The more you see, the less you can pretend. And the world runs on pretense. Relationships thrive on unspoken lies. Careers reward conformity. Society celebrates those who play the game, not those who question it. So what happens when you can't play along? When the illusions that comfort others only make you restless? When your mind refuses to settle for easy answers? You become a ghost, present but not part of things. You learn to wear masks, to nod and smile, all while screaming inside. You scroll through social media, watching people chase validation for things you know are meaningless, and wonder, is there anyone else who sees this? And the cruelest twist? The smarter you are, the harder it is to find your kind. Because intelligence isn't just about knowledge, it's about perception. It's seeing the strings pulling human behavior, the insecurities driving ambition, the fear behind aggression. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to notice how few people truly think, how many just react, repeat, regurgitate. So you withdraw, not because you hate people, but because connecting feels impossible. You crave depth, but the world offers only surface. You hunger for real conversation, but most talk is just noise. And so, the question burns. Is loneliness the inevitable cost of intelligence? Or is there another way, a way to see the world clearly without being exiled by it? The loneliness of intelligence isn't an accident. It's a design flaw woven into the fabric of society itself. To understand why, we must first dismantle a comforting lie that humans evolved to value truth. We didn't. We evolved to value survival. And survival has always favored cohesion over clarity, tribal loyalty over inconvenient truths. From the earliest campfires to modern boardrooms, groups reward agreement, not insight. The moment your thoughts threaten collective harmony, you become a threat, not because you're wrong, but because you're disruptive. The psychology of exclusion. Cognitive science reveals an uncomfortable truth. The human brain is wired to reject divergent thinkers. Studies on group polarization show that when faced with an opinion that challenges consensus, neural activity in the amygdala, the fear center, spikes. This isn't rational disagreement, it's biological alarm. Your intelligence doesn't just make you lonely, it triggers primal hostility. Jean-Paul Sartre saw this clearly. Hell is other people, but the deeper hell is realizing why. Most social interaction isn't about truth-seeking, it's about status calibration. When you refuse to play along, when you question the script, you aren't just breaking rules, you're exposing the game. And no one thanks you for that. The tyranny of the average mind. Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the herd mentality cuts to the core of this dynamic. Society isn't neutral ground, it's a battleground of intellectual mediocrity. The herd doesn't hate intelligence itself, it hates what intelligence reveals, uncomfortable truths about its own illusions. Consider, why do workplaces promote agreeable managers over brilliant iconoclasts? Why do schools punish curiosity that deviates from the curriculum? Why do most friendships dissolve when conversations turn too real? The answer lies in what psychologist Irving Janis called groupthink, the instinct to prioritize harmony over critical thought. Intelligence, by its nature, disrupts this harmony. The smarter you are, the more you notice contradictions, hypocrisy, and systemic flaws. And the more you notice, the harder it becomes to stay silent. The double bind of awareness. Here's where the trap tightens. Intelligent individuals face a brutal double bind. If you speak truth, you're ostracized. If you stay silent, you suffocate. Arthur Schopenhauer captured this perfectly. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. But seeing invisible targets is a solitary pursuit. The more profound your thoughts, the fewer peers exist to validate them. This creates a psychological toll that Carl Jung recognized as the wounded healer archetype, the burden of those who see too much to ever feel at home. The dopamine deception. Modern neuroscience adds another layer to this isolation. Social bonding is reinforced by dopamine, the same neurotransmitter hijacked by social media, likes, and viral approval. But intelligent minds often derive less satisfaction from these shallow rewards. Studies on need for cognition show that people with higher IQs prefer complex stimuli over repetitive social validation. In other words, most brains crave the sugar rush of tribal acceptance. Your brain craves the slow burn of hard truth. This isn't elitism, it's neurodivergence. When your primary source of meaning comes from understanding rather than belonging, you're not just lonely, you're addicted to a drug society doesn't sell. The philosophical abyss. Viktor Frankl's man's search for meaning hints at the existential crossroads intelligent people face. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. The loneliness you feel isn't a personal failure. It's a rational response to a world that prioritizes comfort over truth. Aldous Huxley saw this coming. In Brave New World, he warned that the future wouldn't censor dissent, it would drown it in triviality. Today's endless scroll of viral trends and manufactured outrage proves him right. The intelligent aren't just lonely, they're refugees in a culture that deleted depth. The turning point. This brings us to the razor's edge of realization. Your loneliness isn't evidence of brokenness, it's evidence of sight. The void you feel isn't from lacking connections, but from lacking real ones. The next question, the one that either crushes or liberates, is what you do with this knowledge. The loneliness of intelligence doesn't just hurt, it reshapes you. Like radiation poisoning, its effects are invisible at first. You might mistake them for personality quirks or philosophical preferences. But over time, the cumulative toll becomes undeniable. A slow erosion of trust, a warping of desires, a quiet resignation that most people will never truly see you. The distortion of relationships. Intelligent loneliness doesn't mean having no friends. It means having friends who never meet you in the depths. You learn to self-censor in real time, editing thoughts before they leave your lips. Feign interest in conversations that feel like intellectual malnutrition. Smile politely when someone mistakes your silence for agreement. Psychologists call this cognitive loneliness, the specific ache of being surrounded by people, yet starved for mental connection. Studies show it correlates more strongly with depression than social isolation itself. Why? Because the body can endure hunger, but the mind cannot endure being force-fed emptiness. The paradox of dating. Romantic relationships magnify this crisis. Dating apps become psychological minefields where wit gets reduced to swipe-optimized banter. Depth is mistaken for intensity. Chemistry often means mutual avoidance of real questions. The smarter you are, the more you recognize the unspoken contract of modern love. Don't disrupt the fantasy. Partners who crave stability panic when you question relationship norms. Those who claim to want deep connection often mean validation on my terms. The result? You either settle for pleasant fiction or resign yourself to solitude. The professional penalty. Workplaces compound this isolation through what economists call the mediocrity tax. Group projects reward consensus over brilliance. Office politics punish those who spot its absurdity. Promotions go to those who best mimic enthusiasm for trivial goals. A Yale study found that employees with higher IQs report more job dissatisfaction, not because they're lazy, but because they see through the performative busyness that others accept as meaningful work. Your intelligence becomes a curse. You can't unsee how much of professional life is theater. The neurological toll. Chronic intellectual loneliness physically alters your brain. The default mode network, responsible for self-reflection, becomes hyperactive. Dopamine receptors downregulate in response to shallow social rewards. Cortisol levels remain elevated as your mind stays vigilant for authentic connection. This isn't speculation. fMRI studies show that people who score high in openness to experience, a trait correlated with intelligence, exhibit neural patterns resembling social pain during conventional interactions. Your loneliness isn't imagined, it's measurable. The spiritual crisis. Eventually, this isolation metastasizes into existential dread. You start questioning. If truth leads to alienation, is truth worth pursuing? If no one understands you, does your understanding matter? If society rewards conformity, is rebellion just self-sabotage? This is the cruelest consequence. Intelligence doesn't just isolate you from others, it can isolate you from yourself. The constant code switching, the stifled thoughts, the performative normalcy, they create a psychological split. You become a stranger in your own life. The fork in the road. Here's where most intelligent people make a fatal mistake. They assume the problem is them. That if they just found the right social circle, landed the perfect partner, discovered the fulfilling career, the loneliness would vanish. But this is illusion. The crisis isn't about finding better connections. It's about redefining connection itself. The moment you realize your loneliness is not a defect, but a signal, that's when the rebellion begins. This is not about coping, not about numbing the ache with distractions or lowering your standards to fit in. This is about weaponizing your isolation, turning it into the forge where a stronger, more authentic self is hammered into existence. History's greatest minds faced this crucible and left behind maps for escaping the trap. The Nietzschean shift from loneliness to sovereignty. Friedrich Nietzsche's entire philosophy was born from isolation. His prescription? Become a creator, not a consumer of values. Stop seeking belonging, create your own intellectual world. Stop begging for understanding, becomes so self-contained that understanding becomes irrelevant. Stop resenting the herd, transcend it entirely. His concept of the Übermensch isn't about superiority, it's about self-authorship. When no existing tribe fits, you don't shrink yourself to join one. You become the founder of a tribe that doesn't yet exist. Practical rebellion. Start a private journal where you think without filters. Write the book you need to read. Develop ideas so potent they attract the right minds naturally. Jung's shadow work. making peace with your outcast self. Carl Jung discovered that the deepest loneliness comes from disowning parts of yourself to please others. His solution? Shadow integration. That sarcastic edge you soften to seem approachable? Let it exist. Those unconventional desires you suppress? Explore them. The anger at having to constantly translate yourself? Channel it into creation. When Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are," he was revealing the antidote to intellectual loneliness. Stop trying to be understood and start being undeniable. Practical rebellion. Identify one weird interest or opinion you hide and express it unapologetically this week. Watch how it acts as a homing beacon for your tribe. The Stoic Sanctuary, building an inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while feeling profoundly alone. His meditations reveal the Stoic secret, an inner fortress no external silence can breach. Reframe solitude as clarity. Reinterpret rejection as selection. Recast loneliness as curational freedom. Epictetus took this further. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The moment you stop needing validation is the moment you gain leverage over reality itself. Practical rebellion. For 1 month, pursue a skill or project with zero social sharing. Let the work itself be the reward. The Dostoevsky breakthrough, finding God in the abyss. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky's protagonist declares, "I swear, gentlemen, that to be too conscious is an illness, a real thoroughgoing illness." Yet his later works reveal the redemption, suffering as the pathway to higher meaning. Your isolation isn't emptiness, it's sacred space. Your discomfort isn't failure, it's fertile ground. Your alienation isn't permanent, it's initiation. The Russian novelist proved that the deepest thinkers eventually hit a choice: collapse into nihilism or discover a purpose so personal it needs no audience. Practical rebellion. Identify one societal lie you've pretended to believe and consciously reject it today. The mate imperative, turning pain into power. Gabor Maté's research on addiction reveals a shocking truth. All compulsive behaviors are attempts to regulate disconnection. The intelligent mind's version? Overwork as avoidance of unmet intellectual hunger. Cynicism as armor against repeated disappointment. Analysis paralysis as protest against shallow solutions. His solution? Authentic self-expression becomes the new dopamine. When you channel your unused mental energy into creation rather than critique, loneliness transforms into fuel. Practical rebellion. Convert one complaint about society into a constructive project, however small. The turning point. These strategies share one radical thread. Your loneliness isn't something to cure, it's something to harness. The world needs people who've endured this fire, not to fit in better, but to remake reality. There comes a moment, often in the quietest hour of night, when the last veil lifts. All those years of feeling like an outsider, those countless conversations where you bit your tongue, those simmering frustrations with a world that seems determined to stay asleep, suddenly, they make terrible, perfect sense. The loneliness was never your curse. It was your calling. The alchemist's secret. Every major leap in human consciousness was birthed from someone's loneliness. Einstein worked as a patent clerk, isolated from academia. Emily Dickinson wrote masterpieces in a room where no one entered. Van Gogh painted starry nights seen by almost no living eyes. Your isolation isn't an obstacle to greatness, it's the prerequisite. The crowd cannot go where you're headed because the crowd doesn't yet know that place exists. The intelligence-loneliness paradox resolved. The equation inverts itself when you realize. The reason you felt so alone is that you're not meant to belong to the present. You're meant to help create the future. Those mismatched friendships, they weren't failures, they were filtering mechanisms. Those stifled thoughts, they weren't burdens, they were seeds. That chronic sense of being out of step, it wasn't a flaw, it was perfect timing for a different timeline. The visionary's burden and gift. Ancient myths spoke of this. Prometheus had to be chained to the rock. Cassandra had to be disbelieved. The Buddha had to leave the palace. Not as punishments, but as initiations. The pain of seeing clearly in a blurred world isn't accidental. It's the universe's way of qualifying its agents of change. Your new arithmetic. From today, measure differently. Every moment of misunderstanding becomes confirmation you're ahead of the curve. Every failed small talk attempt becomes time reinvested in your inner world. Every weird label becomes evidence you've escaped the hive mind. The mathematician Srimivasa Ramanujan, working in isolation with no formal training, produced theorems that would take conventional mathematicians decades to verify. His notebooks, filled with insights he couldn't fully explain, prove something radical. Sometimes truth emerges first in those willing to be alone with it. The final invitation. This is your crossroads moment. You can continue resenting a world that doesn't understand you, or recognize that this very frustration is the engine of evolution. The choice is binary. Shrink your mind to fit existing containers. Expand until the world must reshape to meet you. History whispers which path matters. The cave paintings at Lascaux, Galileo's whispered, and yet it moves. Turing's apple, all were lonely acts that later became humanity's shared inheritance. The ultimate realization. Here in the silence where no one applauds, where no social metrics validate, where you stand utterly alone with your thoughts, this is where everything begins. Your loneliness was never the absence of others. It was the presence of something unborn trying to reach the world through you. Now the question remains: will you betray it by craving belonging? Or will you fulfill it by becoming what you've always been?